Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka Mono Bluetron, back again with another episode of 10-Minute Testing. Now, we've spent a lot of time on this show testing and tuning established strategies, so it's good to get back to our roots every once in a while. Today we're returning to those roots with a janky, awful, terrible deck that loses to everything, thanks to Konami's incredibly aggressive anime import policy. We finally got most of the Timelords, as well as some associated traps that are actually sort of playable, so let's do our best and see if a deck that summons one monster and passes on turn 1 has what it takes to compete. So here's the list, and sorry, I had a little hand trap in my mouth. As always, I'll give you a little bit of background about the archetype, a little bit of a discussion about what I hope the deck can do, and as always, the card by card. So firstly, for those of you that don't know, Timelords are an archetype of level 10 fairy monsters used by Zone in the anime, who for the record, has a name like a Sonic the Hedgehog villain. These monsters are super effective at one thing and one thing only, people who don't read. I swear to God, these cards have a hidden passive where people just pass out after reading a sentence of the novella of their effect text. Each of them can be normal summoned if you control no monsters, can't be destroyed by cards, effects, or battle, don't deal or cause damage from battles, and have an effect that triggers if they're involved in battle. Previously, they've been regulated to side deck material based on the format. Metaion bounces every monster your opponent controls to their hand, and Zaphion spins all their spells and traps to the deck, and for a long time those were the only two that were even remotely playable. And then Konami heard the bemoaned screams of Timelord players who had to be satisfied with Herald Timelord and released the rest of the tribe. We're playing all of the good ones, the one that halves life points, the one that deals 2,000 damage, and then a bunch of one-ofs to facilitate a strong Time Maiden package and beat certain game states. Usually, Timelords can use their normal summon reliant monsters to play a suite of tight floodgates, but we're eschewing those in favor of hand traps so that we can play the intensely xenophobic new line of traps. If you thought their previous burn plan was hard as hell to assemble, this new one is twice as dirtily. Over the course of 3 turns, it's meant to win the game by swarming the field with Timelords. Unfortunately, they prevent you from playing other spells and traps in your zones, so hence the hand traps. Get used to passing turn 1 and attacking for 4,000 on turn 2. So with that, let's get into the card by card. First, we're playing 3 copies of Michion the Timelord, who halves life points, 3 copies of Sandion the Timelord, who deals 2,000 damage, and 3 Time Maiden. This is followed by an extensive Time Maiden package, 1 copy of Zaphion, who spins spells and traps, 1 copy of Medion, who bounces monsters, 1 Lazion, who deals 1,000 damage per draw and shuffles the graveyard into the deck, 1 Gabrion, who Wheel of Fates your opponent, and 1 copy of Raphion, who Ring of Destructions. Next are our hand traps, 3 copies of Ash, 3 copies of Ogre, and 3 copies of Veiler. After that are our spells, 1 Foolish Burial and 1 1-for-1 for Time Maiden, 3 copies of Pot of Duality, and 3 Twin Twister to get our Timelords into the grave for non-existence. After that are the traps, starting with 3 non-existence, which cycles Timelords, protects itself, and upgrades to Endless Emptiness. This card specials a Timelord from hand and upgrades into Infinite Light, which specials a Timelord from deck, hand, and graveyard, and prevents them from leaving. Finally, we've got 3 Torrential and 1 Ring of Destruction. The extra is a bunch of stuff that we're never going to go into. With that, let's jump into the games. So the first couple games are going to be very fast, mostly because Timelord is an excruciatingly slow deck, and people would much rather concede than play out losing game states. Our first match is up against Mech Knight World Chalice, a very interesting take on the deck, and they've drawn very well. We get to go first, but unfortunately we don't excel at doing so. Let's just set this non-existence. I don't set the Torrential Tribute, so I have the option of porting out. Our opponent's going to start by activating the effective Agent of Creation Venus. That is a prime target for Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, so they end on 1 normal monster, and they'll pass it back to us. I elect not to activate the effect of non-existence because I'd much rather have a second Time Lord in hand before I do so. I draw just that, so I have their life points with Michion and pass it back. Our opponent's going to start by special summoning a Jack Knight of the Azure Sky. Probably should have played around that. He'll then go into a Rescue Rabbit, and what do you know? This is prime torrential material. I'll go ahead and fire that off. It's not reciprocal, and our opponent concedes. Another very quick one for a slightly different reason. Our opponent is playing F.A. Zodiac, a deck that I'm convinced should not work as well as it does. They've opened pretty well and get to go first. They're going to start by normal summoning a copy of Hang On Mock, then using the effective Zodiac Barrage in order to get a second Thoroughblade from deck, ditching the one in hand. Is PTSD a win condition? They're then going to set a Baguska in defense position and pass it back to us. That's really good news for us. We'll Twin Twist that set card, then go into a Michion. It gets set to defense position. Remember, the effect to return is activated, so it's negated by a Baguska, but is still indestructible by battle, so we get to just wait it out. They're going to test run their own Baguska for a copy of Auto Navigator, get themselves a Grand Prix, and then Ties of the Brethren this Whip Crosser for a Hang On Mock and a Sonic Meister. They're going to set them to 7 with this Grand Prix, and then pass it back to us, 3 very scary monsters on their side of the board. Unfortunately, none of them can defeat my impressive defensive position threat, which will get shuffled back in standby. We have a couple of Time Lords in hand, one of which is Sandion. We'll go into him and do 2,000 points of damage. Our opponent is going to draw, and then as soon as they read Endless Emptiness, concede. Our third match is up against Pendulum Magicians, and this is a game in which we very much benefit from the hidden passive of the Time Lord cards. Nobody reads them. We've opened Infinite Light, which is not particularly good, but we are going first, so maybe we can make this work. We're going to start by activating Pot of Duality, and we find a Time Lord, I guess? We'll set this Torrential Tribute and hope for the best. Our opponent is going to go off as hard as they can. They'll start by activating the effect of Supreme King Dragon Darkworm to get themselves a 0, then activate a Chronograph Sorcerer to go into Time Gazer and Electromite. That Electromite's going to send an Astrograph to the top of their extra deck. They'll then destroy the Pendulum Gate 0 to bring back the Astrograph, then special summon the Astrograph, targeting the Chronograph, getting another copy, setting it in an Oath Dragon Magician, and pendulum summoning as many as possible. They go for 3 with a Harmonizing Magician effect. We'll chain Torrential Tribute. They get a copy of Perp Poison in defense, and they will pass it back. We fire off this copy of Pot of Duality, but it gets negated with Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. But what else did we rip off the top by Zaphion? Our opponent does not read the interaction between Zaphion and Pendulum Graph of Spacetime and concedes. Those were some pretty fast games. As a result, our fourth match is a best-of-3 versus meta. Our opponent is on True Draco, which, could be a good matchup. I mean, they can't destroy any of our monsters. Our spells and traps resist destruction. We'll see. We get to start, so we're going to go ahead and set this copy of Torrential Tribute and hope for the best. Way less impressive against this deck than it was versus Pendulum Magicians. Our opponent's going to start by activating Terraforming, getting a Dragonic Diagram, then firing off this Pot of Desires, finding an anti-spell and a Duality. They'll go ahead and get the Ignis Heat to hand with the Duality, then Tribute for it, activate Dragonic Diagram, use the effect of Heritage and Graveyard to pop our set, then draw 2 off the second Heritage, attack in for 2,700, and set as many as possible. This is prime Zaphion territory. So I'm going to go ahead and special summon this copy of Time Maiden, use her effect to get Zaphion. They're going to get another spell to hand. We'll get that sucker right into our hand, normal summon it, attack, and oh god. Ooh, lord. Well, I guess we lose to Skill Drain. Alright, so game 2, we've drawn okay. We at the very least have non-existence, so maybe we can win through that line. We're going to start by firing off this copy of Pot of Duality. It's going to find us a Veiler, another copy of non-existence, and a 1-for-1. Oh god. So we'll set 2 and pass. Our opponent's going to start by firing off this copy of Awato Imato always, then activating Terraforming to get Dragonic Diagram. I don't want them destroying Amato, so I'll go ahead and fire off this Ring of Destruction in response to the effect. They discard a Skill Drain, and I'm always happy to see that card leave the hand. They'll then go into a Majesty Maiden, target the non-existence once per turn, baby, and we take 2,600, follow it up with a Card of Demise for a second Dragonic Diagram, getting a Heritage to draw 1, and setting set card they draw. So we've drawn the Infinite Light, which is pretty bad news, but otherwise our hand is looking a-okay. We have a Time Maiden, and this is prime Zaphion territory. We're going to go ahead and special the Time Maiden. Afterwards, we're going to tribute it so we can get said Zaphion to hand and start attacking. Now, they can make a Masterpiece here, which is not ideal. Drawing the Infinite Light means that they are going to be able to destroy it. That's really bad news for us because it's kind of our win condition. Otherwise, we would have probably, gone for the line where we make Michion do 4,000, then make Sandyon do 2,000. As of now, I don't think we can win this game with just Endless Light. It just doesn't do enough. They draw into what else? A Pot of Duality, finding a Card of Demise, finding a Pot of Desires. One thing that this deck does like no other is draw. Well, that Zaphion's going back to the top of our deck, which is not ideal, but we do have an activation available in the graveyard of Time Maiden. We'll do just that for the Zaphion one more time. Here's another Apocalypse, destroying this Disciples, targeting our Endless Light so they can destroy it with the Masterpiece. We're going to shuffle back everything else relevant, set 1 card, and pass it back to our opponents. We do have the last non-existence, which is a little bit of a plus. We can maybe cycle into relevant stuff, but there's not a lot relevant left in the deck. We're going to prevent it from being destroyed. We actually find a use for our Effect Veiler, but, it's pretty narrow. At this point, we're really staring down the barrel here. What do we find but another non-existence, and what do we draw but a Ghost Ogre? So it looks like that's going to be it. Oh, you thought it was over? Well, guess what? I have one more incredibly cursed replay for you. The most powerful deck in the game versus the most powerful deck in the game. Time Lord v Time Lord. Who will reign victorious? Probably my opponent because they drew Time Maiden. They'll start by Foolish Burialing a Time Maiden. I'm going to Ash Blossom the Banish. They'll then normal summon a Zaphion. I will flip the Torrential because I don't want this card in my deck since none of theirs can be destroyed. We draw Michion. Incredible. And bring their life points down to a measly 4,000. Our opponent's going to shuffle back their copy of Zaphion, then activate Time Maiden once again to get a copy of Michion of their own. They'll then attack our Michion with their Michion. We bring them down to 2k, and what do we draw but? Oh, the most powerful card in our deck! The one remaining Sandillion doing exactly lethal points of damage! Oh, what a rush. So we're back with the deck. This is I mean, this is a weird one. It's actually probably wrong to have such a flexible Time Maiden package. I think I pretty consistently baited myself into going for value plays, but decks are so linear nowadays that really the only way you're going to win is by crossing your fingers that they don't have a specific out to Timelords or the non-existence chain. I mean, it's not unlikely that they don't have those tools, but as effect negation gets better and better, this janky occasional win stealer is going to steal wins less and less. So that's that. I hope you've enjoyed a return to form of Killing Buzz. If you want to see me play the decks I make on this show on stream, I'm on twitch.tv/monobluetron every Tuesday and Thursday from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and if you have a certain idea for a deck or archetype you want me to take a look at, let me know in the comments and I'll do my best. Otherwise, I'll see you Monday.